Welcome everyone to the Monday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers had a rare Monday practice after having a game on Thursday, taking 3 days off and hitting the field once more. Head coach Matt LaFleur called it a day to shake the rust off. I would agree, Jim. It's also a day for us to shake the rust off. It is good to see all of you once again. We'll get into today's practice, let you know what you need to know. Plus, we'll also look ahead to this weekend's game against the Jaguars in just a moment. However, as always, before we begin, you can be a part of our conversation. If you are over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the comments. Jim and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. COVID-19 hit the Packers, and it hit them hard this past week. They placed 5 players on COVID-19 reserve, including 2 known positives with running back A.J. Dillon and inside linebacker Krys Barnes. However, those two are still on the list. However, the Packers welcome back a couple of close contacts to Dillon today in running back Jamal Williams and inside linebacker Kamal Martin. What is the potential timeline for return for both Barnes and Dillon?
Yeah, that's, first of all, Olivia, they have to have several negative tests since they were the players identified as actually testing positive as opposed to being in close contact. So, I think with something like this, I think there's that minimum 5-day window. But I honestly, it also determines if they're symptoms. So if they're asymptomatic, that's sort of one level. If there's symptoms, that pushes everything further out because it's got to be X amount of days from when the last symptom disappears and then test after that. And then also, let's be honest, Olivia, whether they're symptomatic or not, we know enough about this virus to know that it affects breathing. Sometimes there's some mental fogginess we've read about. Heart rate, things like that. So, we can't just assume that even once they sort of pass the test of having the virus, that they're ready to play. So Barnes and Dillon, I think that's totally up in the air. In terms of Jordan Love, the other close contact, I think November 9th or 8th was when they were placed. So he's probably got 5 days out from then.
Quarterback Jordan Love, who was a close contact of Krys Barnes, is still on injured reserve. We'll keep you guys updated as we learn a little bit more as to what their health status is currently. The Packers may be getting some other players back this week. Wide receiver Allen Lazard and inside linebacker Christian Kirksey, who are both on injured reserve, continue to practice this week. On Wednesday, that will begin their 3rd week of practice. Then they will have until November 18th before the Packers must decide to either put them on the active 53 or season-ending injured reserve. How likely is it that Lazard and Kirksey are activated before this Sunday's game against the Jaguars?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's no reason to activate them. I'm sure Packers fans are screaming, "Wait a minute, we could use another wide receiver and an inside linebacker," but remember, it would require roster moves. So, is that James Burgess getting cut? Which wide receiver, is going to be cut? So Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur will have to figure that out. I don't think you would bring those 2 guys back for the Jaguars unless they were ready to play, right? Like, I don't think you would want them to come back and then you say, well, they have to be inactive because they're not up to game speed yet. You know what I mean? So I think there's a likelihood, like, they've been back practicing for 2 weeks, but it is the Jaguars. And while the head coach will tell us all this week, Olivia, any team can win on any given Sunday, you'd like to think if you're the Packers, you can win with, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Kenny Clark and all these guys. So I'm going to say 50-50. Just because I think they just need to decide when they look at this long injury report that they're going to have on Wednesday, who's playing, who's not. Does someone have to go on IR maybe that we're not thinking about to make a roster swap? So I'm going to go 50-50 as of today, Monday. Maybe as these live streams go on the rest of the week, Olivia, that percentage changes.
Left tackle David Bakhtiari and cornerback Kevin King, who are dealing with chest and quad injuries respectively, also practiced today. Bakhtiari has missed 3 games. King has missed 4 games. LaFleur said he is hopeful to see both of them return this week. We'll let you know as we learn a little bit more as practice goes on. We'll see exactly what their practice capacities are as the week continues. Let's look ahead to this Sunday's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Packers fans, you may have been looking forward to mustache versus mustache, quarterback Aaron Rodgers versus Jaguars quarterback Gardner Minshew, although I believe Rodgers would have to grow out his facial hair to achieve the mustache. He's not quite there at the moment. Instead, you're going to have to settle for Rodgers versus rookie quarterback Jake Luton. Luton only has 1 NFL game under his belt, this weekend's loss to the Houston Texans. However, he played pretty well. He had 26 completions for over 300 passing yards and a touchdown. How do the Packers prepare for a quarterback that has put just about nothing on tape?
Yeah, I think it is a cliche, but it's true. You do scheme the offense. You prepare for the plays that the Jaguars run. Now, granted, some of that is still going to be a little uneven because in Jacksonville, they're finding out what that quarterback is good at and what he likes to run. And that may change in this week of prep as opposed to, say, the previous 6 games. But that said, Olivia, I think, the offense itself is not changing. Through 8 weeks, that is what it is. It's just a matter of, he may like certain throws at certain times as opposed to another guy, but those throws and routes are still in the offense. They're still going to be on tape. So I think that's what you prepare for. And if you're Mike Pettin, maybe it's an opportunity to kind of get creative with a guy who hasn't seen a whole lot of defense. Maybe you don't know, how, able he is to make correct checks and calls and recognize things in protection. So maybe if you're Mike Pettin, you can dial up some stuff on your own that maybe that quarterback hasn't seen.
Maybe it doesn't even matter how good or bad Jake Luton is. The Jaguars have one of the worst scoring offenses in the league. They're 26th right now in points. The defense is somehow worse. They're 31st in points allowed and 31st in yards allowed. How important is it that the Packers win and win decisively this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's important in that if you're the Packers, you want to build off the 49ers game, right? You want the offense to come out and score 30-plus again and look sharp and good against the overman defense at home. And defensively, while we know and we all know and they know that the 49ers were you don't even want to call – I mean, I don't even know who was playing for the 49ers offensively at that point. And the same deal, no disrespect to the Jaguars. I mean, they're in the tank for Trevor Bowl, right? Or one of those type of guys. So if you're the Packers defense, you want to continue to get well. You want to see Preston Smith sack the quarterback and Zadarius Smith make plays and, maybe pick up another couple interceptions. So winning by 30, I don't know if that's what decisive means, Olivia. I think it's be decisive in that it's a bad team at home that you should win the game. And then maybe you can rest some people and make sure they're not, in line for any kind of injury late in a game that really, it shouldn't get to that point.
All right, everybody, let's head over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for some of your questions. It is lovely to see you on this Monday night, a rare Monday live stream. It feels good to be here. Let's start with Andrew. Andrew says that defensive lineman Kenny Clark has not had the effect people thought warming back up or concern. Kenny Clark was missed a few games early in the season due to a groin injury, one of the soft tissue injuries for Clark, but it kept him out for quite a few games. He's been back now for a few games. However, he has not been lighting it up on the stat column. No sacks. Doesn't even look like he's had a quarterback hit over the last 3 games. What is holding back Kenny Clark at this very moment?
Yeah, I'm sure Kenny would say, he expects more out of himself in terms of the raw pass rush numbers. But, I'm sure the coaches will say, well, if he's getting double teamed and other players can get pressures. Now, that's easy to say when other people are getting pressures. I guess maybe to Andrew's point, we're not seeing Dean Lowry or Kingsley Keke in the backfield making plays when they are together. I haven't really looked that closely. I would imagine Kenny Clark is still getting double teamed, which is a victory to a degree if he can kind of hold that double team. And now, granted, you could say his extension, he is paid to beat some of those. I think as we're hitting November, mid-November, December, I think, the expectation to see 97 in the backfield more often is going to be fair. As a reminder, his first game back was Tampa. He was only he even said he was only supposed to play. Olivia, do you recall? Like, it was a certain percentage of snaps. Tyler Lancaster got hurt, and that kind of threw that all off, which makes me think, the next game in Houston, he probably shouldn't have or wouldn't have played as much. I feel like he's ramping back up, and you would think now is ready to kind of take the next step to where he should be, so to speak.
Thanks, Andrew, for your question. Let's take a question here from Jared over on Facebook. Jared says, hello, do you think the Packers sign a running back for injured running back Dexter Williams, or try to sign a free agent defensive lineman or defensive end? Dexter Williams is on the injury report. He will be on the injury report when it comes out. He did not practice today as he's dealing with a knee injury he sustained this past week in San Francisco on Thursday night. How likely is it that the Packers sign another running back, given the fact that they were extremely thin at running back this past week with Jamal Williams out, Aaron Jones being questionable? It was a little bit of a mess there. How likely is it that they boost up that room with Williams potentially out for a little bit?
Well, it didn't look like Aaron Jones showed today, Olivia, any ill effects of playing those snaps in San Francisco. He looked healthy, participated fully, at least to our eyes. I would imagine come Wednesday, he might still come across as limited with the calf. But that may change some of this. If you've got Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and Tyler Ervin worked out with running backs today, that's probably the first time we've seen him do that all year. Dylan, as we started this live stream, is really the up in the air type of thing. So would they feel good with just 3 running backs on the active roster? I mean, that's what they've had when Dylan has been the third running back. Williams is interesting. He's on the practice squad. They could put him injured reserve for 3 weeks at minimum. They do have that option. I guess it maybe just depends how serious that knee injury is. Is it a 2 to 3 to 4 week type of deal, Olivia? Is there a running back that they could sign to the practice squad that could be available in time for the game? They have to go through the COVID protocols and all that stuff. So, Jared, it's a good question. Right now, I don't know. Some of this might depend on if A.J. Dillon is moving along in his COVID protocol, but that's just something we're not going to know, frankly, until it happens, because they don't have to talk about it.
Thank you, Jared, for your question. Patrick over on Facebook says that this is going to be a test this upcoming weekend against the Jaguars for the Packers defense to make whatever adjustments on offense, and especially the defense. Curious to know who's the leader on defense. The Packers need someone to push this defense. The Packers finally were able to force 2 turnovers on Thursday night against the 49ers. This was the first time they had done it all season, having multiple turnovers in one night. They only had 4 the entire season leading up to Thursday night. We saw players like Preston and Zadarius Smith, the outside linebackers, get some pressure on Mullins to be able to get into some of those scenarios. Preston Smith was able to put pressure on Mullins to create essentially an interception for Raven Green. Who on this defense is most likely to step up on a weekend they should really be able to make a resounding win against the Jaguars?
Yeah, I mean, if you go with who the players think, I mean, they voted Zadarius Smith a leader 2 years, or captain, 2 years in a row. I think Adrian Amos is probably the steadiest guy, I guess, in there, and along with Kenny Clark. I mean, those aren't very vocal players, but in terms of just knowing their assignments and who, the people in their rooms look up to. But it is Zadarius Smith, and then I think to a lesser degree Preston Smith. Zadarius Smith has the C, and they both have the bank accounts. And really, Patrick, I think Preston Smith needs to build off of beating, a backup tackle in San Francisco and finally getting some pressures. Can they do that again against Jacksonville? I mean, Zadarius Smith, I think, is having a decent season. You're seeing him make impact plays on a weekly basis. I think it's really Preston Smith that needs to continue to do what he did last week and add that. I mean, Matt LaFleur said this defense, it runs on its sort of own emotion, its own juice, if you will. And really that's going to come from those rush guys, because the other leaders, I think they're the follow us, lead by example type of leaders, as opposed to the rah-rah kind of crazy, get them all hyped up type of deal.
Thank you, Patrick, for your question. We have a question here from Matthew over on Facebook. Good to see Matthew. Matthew says it's a tie record between the New Orleans Saints, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Green Bay Packers, 6-2. Who gets the edge in the playoffs? The Bucs handed the Saints a loss last night. The Bills handed the Seahawks a loss. Who has the edge in the playoffs, I suppose, as we get closer and closer halfway through the season?
Yeah, I mean, this is the race. There's only one bye as of now. I mean, we'll see if COVID, if there's a playoff bubble, if this affects things. But as of now, there's one bye. And I would argue that the team that needs that the most would be Seattle, because the idea of flying 2,000 plus miles, even if there are no fans in that stadium, because the home feels kind of mitigated to a lot of degrees in that way, that's still a long flight. And even for them to fly anywhere else. So to me, I think the edge goes to Seattle if they can hold the 1 seed. Teams like Tampa, New Orleans are going to have some fans in the playoffs. I don't really know if that's not going to be the same as 80,000 in the Superdome. If the Packers have to go back down there again in the postseason. So Matthew, I think in terms of the edge, it would go to Seattle if they can get the bye. And then, frankly, after that, I don't see why Green Bay wouldn't have one. You're talking about Tampa, a Florida team, although the quarterback isn't going to mind the cold weather. And then you've got a dome team coming to the cold weather. So I think Seattle first if they can get it, and I think the Packers do have a slight edge playing at home, especially if they can in the postseason.
Thank you, Matthew, for joining us and for your thoughtful question. Let's take a question here from Joel over on Facebook. Joel asks, why does everyone keep praising the Packers on their win against the 49ers? The Packers played a high school team, basically. The 49ers were down a whole lot of players, including tight end George Kittle, running back Raheem Mostert, running back Tevin Coleman, their quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. However, the Packers won decisively against the 49ers. How much credit do they deserve for pulling out a big win?
Well, I mean, they get credit for the win. A win's a win. I mean, 10, 14 days ago, they lost against the Vikings team they probably should have beat. And who was playing for the Vikings on defense at that point, especially in the secondary by the fourth quarter? I mean, no one can name any of those guys right now. So it's funny, Joel, because if you listen to the Tom Silverstein and I's podcast, people say that we're too negative because we brought this exact point up that, the 49ers, they just didn't have the talent. And you're right. No, the Packers deserve credit for they lost a game most of us would say they shouldn't have lost at home. 19 players on the injury report, 3 players on COVID, flying 2,000 miles, no practice. That's still not an easy thing. So, yes, they deserve credit for the bounce back and not losing 2 straight games in a row to teams they shouldn't. So I think that's why they should get some praise and credit, Joel, for that. And now we'll just see going forward if they can kind of snowball off some, especially on defense.
Tom being negative, that blows my mind. I've never heard that before. Don't expect that from our friend Tom Silverstein, no. PackersNews.com, JS Online columnist. We have a lot of love in our hearts for Tom. That is going to do it for us tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on Wednesday when the Packers resume practicing, gearing up for their game this weekend against the Jaguars. For Jim Owczarski, I am Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.